Our next speaker is Eli Schlizerman, who's from UW, Applied Math, and he's going to talk to us about robust learning and, again, using neural networks.
Right. Thanks, everyone, for attending, and thanks to the organizers for inviting me to this really great symposium. Lots of related aspects already were addressed, so I'm happy that I'm present here at this time. My talk will be on robust neural and behavioral representations. Our laboratory is a joint laboratory between applied mathematics and electrical and computer engineering at the University of Washington, and I will be featuring mostly the work of PhD students in the lab. Jingyuan Li will be leading mentee that is featured in this work. She just graduated and now joined Amazon Research. Trung Li is still in the lab. Kun Su was also involved in the work at Google Research. Xiaolong Liu is joining Apple ML soon. And this is really great work in kind of combining AI and neuroscience. The idea is that we are really interested in this connection between brain activity and behavior. So how do we make this connection? Through data that is collected and also through the deep learning methodology. We indeed have a lot of data in both these aspects. From neural recordings point of view, we have different types of technologies that are just emerging and generating quite a lot of data. They introduce also an interesting challenge to deep learning because these different modalities are of different types. So you could get spiking activity versus continuous signals for local field potentials or ECOG arrays and so on. So how do you analyze them? At the same time, we also have behavior metrics that are available and sometimes recorded at the same time. This could be continuous physical measurements of behavior. This could be also processing of behavior in terms of different labels, different types of behavior, or experimental setup that is set up to perform a particular type of behavioral execution. So all of these, we would like to combine them together and eventually merge them together to align them together. And latent representations, so representations of these data sets such that they will be alignable, are important methodological aspects that we need to address. Basically, the idea of encoders is to provide such a representation, to encode the different data sets into representation that then we can do it first separately for neural data and then behavioral data, but then we can actually go back and forth between these different modalities. So my talk will be on these different methods that we are developing, but before I wanted to mention the main kind of paradigms for representation learning. And the first that I wanted to mention that is quite general is contrastive learning. And this is an unsupervised encoding paradigm. And the idea is in terms of time series that one would consider is to create positive and negative examples of the data that is recorded. In this case, you can see on this diagram, it will be an augmentation of the data. And a paper that was introduced, that was published in 2018 called Info and CE, which is noise contrastive estimation, will show that if we do such an augmentation or perturbation of the data, we are able to then train a network that will be encoding and becoming better at estimation in terms of taking the positive examples close to each other and then the negative examples farther from each other. In terms of augmentation, this could be done by perturbing the signal and then considering same signal at the same time as positive example, and then signal at distant times as negative examples. And this is what this method CLTS is based on. Also, SimClear is a popular method, but for vision inputs, and also many of you are probably familiar with Zebra that is based on a similar idea. The nice thing about contrastive methods is that they are applicable whether to neural recordings or behavioral recordings, and also one could use both of them to prior each other. So one could use behavioral recordings to prior and align to a neural recording, or vice versa, and so on. But what this framework is missing, or actually introduces a challenge, is that how do you do this augmentation? And that's something that one could approach with different approaches in terms of looking at the particular specific features that are incorporated, whether in neural recordings or behavioral recordings. So another alternative approach would be an encoder-decoder approach, where one would design, and I will call this method as generative approach versus contrastive approach, where one would design an encoder and then a decoder that will aim to decode the signal from that encoder, eventually to reproduce the original signal. In such a case, if this network works well, this bottleneck layer in between the encoder and decoder will be the latent representation, and we are hoping that it will be informative. And for this paradigm, networks such as LFADs or systems such as LFADs would be very compatible with it. This is well known in neuroscience, published in Nature Methods. Or it could be for other signals. For example, we introduced a recurrent neural network for ECOG signals, and also to have different bands of frequencies. But it is based on a similar idea that the latent state that is transferred from the encoder to the decoder encodes this particular representation. Okay. So one of the possibilities in this, one could apply encoder-decoder just in a straightforward way, and then to hope to get a latent representation that is effective. But one of the possibilities is to look at options, how you would improve this latent representation, make it more robust to eventually downstream tasks like classifying different trajectories and so on. So something that was introduced in the literature for visual signals, this is the work by He et al. In CVPR 2020, is actually to a similar idea of augmentation on the input to the encoder. And while it seems like it's working for visual signals, it doesn't really apply well to time-dependent signals. This is an example how it could apply, but actually, in many of the data sets, it won't immediately translate. So one of the approaches that we introduced earlier, and it could be applied to behavioral and also neural recordings, is this weak decoder approach. And the idea is to incorporate the time properties of the signal into the decoder. Remember that what the encoder-decoder is doing is a forward pass first from the encoder to the decoder, and then while it's trained, there is a backward pass from the decoder back to the encoder. So in this paradigm, published in CVPR 2020, we proposed that the decoder will get only partial information from the encoder. In this particular fixed state setup, the decoder will, each state of the decoder, each time of the decoder will get the original input from the encoder. And it basically requires the decoder in the forward pass to predict forward and forward in time as it progresses forward, and then backward, it will patch this trajectory in order to complete and eventually to decode the signal as close as possible to the original input. Okay. So this idea turned out to be quite effective, and we have another paper that shows the intuition to it. I just wanted to show how it looks on low dimensional projection of these trajectories. What basically it does, it pushes trajectories that are close to each other to start from similar points and then to also end at similar points, while in the original encoder-decoder, this property is not that preserved. And this method could be applied to behavioral signals. We consider the action recognition task in this case, but also could be applied to neural signals as well. The latent representation is very important in terms of the downstream task. The better you encode the signal, the better chance you have then in the downstream task, which could be classification or providing additional interpretation to the problem. So in the follow-up work, we show that actually active learning could be applied as this downstream task. Also, other approaches could be possible. So in the work that is called ALSAR, the idea is that once you have derived such a representation, one could apply multiple head structure, which will estimate the uncertainty in the representation. And then based on measuring this uncertainty with multiple heads, one could then propose what are the points that are less certain in terms of classification in the latent representation, and then to ask the user to label only these points and then to go back. This approach, this is a diagram how it works. So iteratively, this approach is supposed to even push further the trajectories close to each other, or the points that are close to each other, and then unknown points farther from each other. We have introduced this symposium is about open source tools. So we introduced the open source code. It's called OpenLight Cluster, and you are welcome to use the tool, which basically, if you give it some videos and then also recordings, so tracked points, it will first provide the baseline latent representation, and then will help the user to pick several points to label, and eventually to enhance the representation. We applied it to several data sets, and we saw that indeed the clustering in the latent representation is significant and works better than supervised approaches. So this is the aspect of incorporating time, and I wanted to show additional work where we recognize that not only time sequence causality matters, but also the spatial aspect of neurons. So in the work named AMAG, what we are considering are signals that are continuous signals, so from ECOG array or LFP. And the idea is to propose a graph neural network that will record the interactions between the neurons. And this graph neural network will have two adjacency matrices. One will be additive and another one multiplicative. And this is to capture the different kind of input-output interactions of neurons, actual neurons that are interacting. Further, we will consider the task of not only generating the same input that was given to the network, but we will consider the task of prediction, forecasting. And from the results that we obtained, we are observing that one-step forecasting, so forecasting further in time, preserving the causality, allows us to reconstruct these adjacency matrices when we are considering similar synthetic inputs, synthetic data, gives us much better recovery of the adjacency matrices. But more than that, we are actually getting the embedding to be naturally organized and unscrambled. You can see in this example here how it is scrambled in the original projection to principal component space, while the hidden embedding is much more aligned in terms of time and the different trials of neurons. Latent representations are, of course, designed as is in the encoder-decoder structure, and this is preferred structure, but also transformer models are proposed to study neural time signals and also behavioral signals. So what could be this realization of spatio-temporal aspect in these models, in the work of so we are relying on the work of E and Pandarinath in 2021, where they showed that NDT could be an effective generative model for neural signals. And we are proposing to add a spatial attention beyond the temporal attention to transformers. And actually, this spatial attention will have contrastive loss that will be trained. What we show in this work that was published in NeurIPS 2022 is that the spatial attention eventually corresponds to this latent representation that could inform us of what are the interactions between the different neurons that could be useful for decoding. And as you can see here, the really interesting thing is that the transformer focuses on particular neurons and these are consistent neurons in the representation. All right, the last example that I would like to give, and it's a pretty recent example, is going all the way to decoding from neural signals to behavior, to eventually some behavioral output. And this is the brain-to-text decoding problem. The idea is that there is a recording from motor area in the brain that corresponds to speech. And for speech-unable person, the method is supposed to predict what kind of words this person is trying to say. And in really exciting work led by Frank Villed and collaborators, they show that an encoder coupled with so encoding neural signals into phonemes could constitute an effective encoder for such input. So instead of going to some prediction that will be immediate and will correspond to speech, there will be an intermediate encoding of phonemes. When looking at it, and you probably from the talk, you're seeing that one could maybe effectively represented with some causality aspects and time-dependent aspects. And indeed, this is what we have noted when one looks at the phoneme space. So this is the latent space projected to t-SNE space. And then looking at the phonemes, we can see that actually transitions between the phonemes are being clustered into particular clusters. So we took this idea into the actual framework by proposing decond, which would be a decoding with context-aware neural representation. And in this case, it will decode the diphones, which are transitions between phonemes, and then collapse them into prediction of words. Combined with a large language model, it would allow to predict the speech or the text from the brain signal. And we are showing that such an approach provides a significant improvement to accuracy versus the approach that doesn't employ such encoding. All right, I see that my time is up, and I'm on the summary slide. I just wanted to summarize all these examples into the lessons that are learned in these examples, that incorporating time specific effects, in particular causality forecasting in the encoders, could provide more robust encoders, and I showed examples of predict and cluster and AMAG. Spatial aspects are important, and if you model the spatial interaction within your network, you're also maybe possible to gain a more robust representation, and this can correspond to more effective decoding. I wanted to thank collaborators, Osborne Lab and Frank Villet, and also mentees in the lab. And thank you for your attention. Also the funding.
All right, questions? All right, I'll ask a question. So in terms of like the temporal and the causal relationship that you're trying to go after, so let's say for this sort of contrastive learning, what additional value does it bring us instead of like looking at many temporal length scales that you can study using like, you know, the classic methods of frequency decomposition and so on and so forth, because, you know, brain have some sort of rhythmicity, especially in terms of like local field potentials, right? So you can look at those things with those tools. What does contrastive learning give us that those tools don't?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of contrastive learning, actually people considered both frequency domain contrastive learning combined with time domain contrastive learning, and there are works such as
they do like a decomposition first, and then they use the contrastive
and then combine it together and do contrastive learning on both sides.
Okay.
In general, contrastive learning is, I see it as an idea to augment the signal, and then to try to separate examples that are not compatible with examples that are more compatible. So such principles could be used, but if you integrate them into the network structure or into the particular kind of constraints on your network, then you may get more robust or more efficient representations.
So, you know, the question that follows that actually is that, like, if you do such thing, let's say, when you have a problem with many length scales, right? Like, because this is one of the things that we see in biology. You have many temporal length scales adding on top of each other, right? So in that case, how do you discern where does this sort of, like, where do you draw this causality boundary, saying, all right, you know what? Because you may end up with a cycle that is similar to another cycle, but it's not necessarily like causally linked together. Like within that cycle, you have a set of events that lead to each other, and within the other cycle, you have another set of events which lead to each other. But if you bring it to contrastive learning, it's going to put them all together. Like, how do you go about this?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. It's a great question. So I'll give several examples. I don't have a full answer for that. That could be, yeah, future works. So one aspect is that we found in the graph neural network that multiple step prediction is actually less effective, and one-step prediction is more effective in terms of eventually deriving a latent representation. So just one step ahead is kind of enough. In predicting cluster, this is actually the structure of the construct. The structure of the construct is to say that I have my initial condition, and then with the different states of the decoder, I will try to predict further and further into the future. So you do incorporate the multi-steps into the future.
Okay.
But you don't do it explicitly. For example, like I want only circular trajectories or some kind of trajectories. It would be interesting to see how you could constrain those.
Okay. Further questions?
I'll
Eric.
ask one more. Thank you. Could you tell us, please, how the decon in the decon, the speech, the brain-to-text recognition algorithm that you have, how are the transitions there sort of richer and more distinct than those in the Willett et al. Model? Because it sounded like they had a large language model. What was the insight that already? So was the difference that you are working sort of more at the phoneme level with these distinct transitions? Just tell us a little bit more about how you got
Yeah.
richer dynamics.
So in this paper, improvements are both to the decoder, which is a large language model, and also for the encoder. Here I am emphasizing the encoder part, which originally was to encode the neural signal into phonemes, while we are proposing to encode it into this table, which decodes the different diphones. Okay, so you can see transitions between one phoneme to another one. This introduces, of course, much more classes and possibilities. So we even consider triphones, which would be like an extremely large problem. And then the idea is to eventually, in the loss, we have both phoneme loss and also diphone loss. We showed that by marginalizing the diphones into eventually a loss would be more effective, more robust representation than just considering phonemes.
Okay, that's very interesting. All right, thank you.
All right. Let's thank Eli for one more time. Thank you very much.